Caitlin Clark, the iconic basketball star known for her humility both on and off the court, gave up her first-class seat to an elderly veteran, unaware of the extraordinary connection that would soon unfold mid-flight. It was a crisp morning at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, and Flight 247 to Newark was fully booked. Caitlin, casually dressed in a sweatshirt and sneakers, sat in first class with her headphones on and a book open, hoping to avoid attention. Meanwhile, in the economy section, an elderly man in his late 70s shuffled to his seat. His silver hair was neatly combed, and he carried an aged leather duffel bag. The military jacket he wore bore faded patches and medals, silently speaking of decades of service and sacrifice. As he made his way to his seat near the rear of the plane, passengers exchanged quiet glances, admiring the quiet dignity in his stride. Seated between a businessman engrossed in his laptop and a restless toddler, the veteran tried to settle in, but the man next to him seemed visibly upset, complaining about needing more space. Despite the veteran's repeated apologies, the commotion grew louder, drawing attention. Caitlin, engrossed in her book, looked up and observed the scene. Seeing the elderly man's discomfort, she pressed the call button and spoke calmly to the flight attendant. "Excuse me, could I switch seats with the gentleman in the military jacket?" The request surprised both the attendant and the passengers in first class. A woman nearby whispered, "You don't have to do that. You paid for this seat." Caitlin simply shrugged and smiled. "Some people deserve it more." Moments later, the flight attendant returned with admiration in her eyes. "He said he'd be happy to switch," she informed Caitlin. Without hesitation, Caitlin grabbed her bag and walked down the aisle, ignoring the murmurs and subtle photos taken by passengers. When she reached the elderly veteran, he looked up in surprise. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice filled with gratitude and disbelief. Caitlin extended her hand and smiled. "I'm sure. Thank you for your service. Please take my seat." The veteran hesitated for a moment, searching her eyes for any hint of insincerity, but all he saw was genuine kindness. Slowly he stood, gripping her hand firmly. "Well, thank you, miss. That's mighty kind of you." As the veteran made his way toward first class, murmurs of admiration rippled through the cabin. A young mother in row 15 whispered to her teenage son, "Did you see that?" She gave up her first-class seat. Caitlin slid into the now vacant economy seat, tucking her long legs into the tight space. Unbothered by the discomfort, she reopened her book. The businessman beside her glanced over and muttered, "Never seen anything like that on a flight?" Caitlin simply smiled and returned to her reading. Meanwhile, in first class, the veteran eased into Caitlin's former seat, adjusting the plush armrest with a look of visible appreciation. A flight attendant approached him with a warm blanket and a drink. "The young lady said you should have this seat," she said softly. The veteran nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's been years since anyone treated me like this." Back in economy, Caitlin remained unaware of the growing buzz surrounding her act of kindness. Passengers whispered, their hushed voices filled with admiration. A flight attendant discreetly approached her. "Is there anything you need, Miss Clark?" Caitlin shook her head with a polite smile. "No, thank you. I'm all set." As the plane reached cruising altitude, the veteran sat quietly, staring out the window, his hands resting on his lap. After a long pause, he turned to the passenger beside him, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "I need to say something," he began, his voice steady but low. She tilted her head, intrigued. "Of course." The veteran adjusted the small purple heart pin on his lapel and sighed. "That young woman who gave me this seat, her family changed my life once." The woman blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" she asked. The veteran leaned back, his expression growing wistful. "It was decades ago during the Gulf War. I came back stateside after being injured, with no family to speak of and nowhere to go. I ended up in Iowa, trying to rebuild my life. One day I was sitting outside a diner, unsure of where my next meal would come from. A man stopped and asked if I was okay. That man was Caitlin Clark's grandfather." The woman's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and awe. "Her grandfather?" The veteran nodded, his voice growing stronger. "He didn't just hand me some change and walk away. He sat with me, listened to my story, and made sure I had a roof over my head. He even helped me find a job. He never asked for anything in return. He just said, "You've served this country, and we owe you for that." I've never forgotten those words. By now, the veteran's story had caught the attention of several passengers in first class. The woman next to him leaned in closer, her expression softening. "That's incredible," she said. "And today, Caitlin Clark, his granddaughter, gave you her seat. It's like life has come full circle." The veteran nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I always wanted to thank her family, but I never got the chance. Life moves on, and I thought that moment was lost forever. But now," he trailed off, glancing toward the economy section, where Caitlin sat quietly, unaware of the ripple effect her simple act had caused. The conversation spread throughout the cabin. A man across the aisle, appearing to be in his 40s, spoke up. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but your story really hit home. My father served in the Gulf War, and he always said the same thing, that the smallest gestures of kindness made the biggest difference when he got home." The veteran turned to him, his face softening. "It's true," he replied. "Back then, I thought my life was over, but someone took the time to care, and that changed everything." That's what Caitlin Clark reminded me of today. As the plane began its descent, the veteran stood from his first-class seat, surprising everyone by making his way toward economy. Passengers turned their heads, watching in curiosity. When he reached Caitlin's row, he stopped and offered her a firm, weathered hand. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "What you did today, it wasn't just about this seat. It was about reminding me of something I'll never forget. Your family helped me rebuild my life, and today, you've honored that legacy." Caitlin shook his hand, her expression warm but humble. "Thank you for your service," she said softly. "I didn't know about my grandfather's kindness, but I'm glad I could carry it forward." The veteran nodded, his eyes glistening. "You did more than carry it forward. You proved that the values he stood for are alive and well in you. Never lose that." A ripple of applause broke out, growing into something more profound. Caitlin, slightly embarrassed by the attention, smiled politely and returned to her book, though her mind was far from its pages. As the plane landed and passengers disembarked, many stopped to thank Caitlin for her generosity, while others expressed their gratitude to the veteran for his service. At the gate, the veteran paused once more. "You've got a good heart," he said, tipping his hat. "Don't ever let the world harden it." Caitlin smiled, her voice soft but firm. "I won't." As she walked toward baggage claim, she pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to her mother. She hesitated for a moment before hitting send. The text read, "Did you know Grandpa helped a veteran after the Gulf War? I think he'd be proud of what happened today." Standing in the quiet hum of the airport, Caitlin felt an unusual sense of pride and introspection. The day had been unexpected, but profoundly meaningful. The veteran's words echoed in her mind. Don't ever let the world harden it. And she knew she never would. Tell us in the comments, what do you think about this whole story? And don't forget to subscribe our channel and press the bell icon for more amazing updates like this.